Hi everyone, I'm Lisa Walton and welcome to my new series. And I've recently started doing work in polymer clay, and one name that keeps popping up all the time is Ginger Davis Allman. And so welcome, Ginger.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
This is really great for me because I read a lot of social media, I watch a lot of YouTube videos, and it's always, what's the best way to do this? How do I do that? What's the best product? And your name and the blue bottle tree just keeps popping up. So it's really great for me to talk to you, and let's find out a little bit more about you and the blue bottle tree. And I know you're not overly fond of your business name, but it's one that people know. So can you just give me a quick description on where that came from?
Well, it's not so much that I don't like it. It's just that it's a mouthful and it's long. It takes, after you type it a few 100,000 times, you start to think you wish your name had been something very, very short. But where it came from was years and years and years ago, when I was a little kid. My grandmother had this vase of blue glass, cobalt blue glass. And being a little kid, like little kids do, I'd lay on the floor and I would hold it over my eyes. And when you look through the glass, it was just like magic. The feeling of peace would come over your body, that whole thing. So years later, when I was getting over a difficult time in my life, I realized I needed that peace. And one thing that I had noticed was that there were garden sculptures called bottle trees. And I had seen pictures of them online, and there was a blue bottle tree. And I thought, I've got to do this. I've got to do this. So I made a blue bottle tree, and then I made a couple more blue bottle trees. So that's what I have. And the blue glass has always been really meaningful to me. So when it came time to, back in the day, I thought I needed a name for my business, like an SC name. So I thought I couldn't just be Ginger. I had to be the blue bottle tree. So that's where that came from.
Yes, color is a very important part of our lives, I think, and brings back great memories. So we're going to talk about polymer clay. These are some blocks of polymer clay. Why would you use polymer clay instead of another medium?
Polymer clay is a modeling clay, but unlike plastilina, which a lot of us used as children, polymer clay is an oven cure clay, which means that it hardens in your oven. Remember when you were a kid and you would work with like Play-Doh or salt dough, and it would dry out and crack, and your clay would go bad, or it would mold or something like that. Polymer clay doesn't do that. It's good forever. So until you bake it. So it allows you to have a modeling clay that actually that you can cure and save forever. So that's what's wonderful about it. But the beauty of polymer clay is that you can carve it, you can build with it, you can sculpt, you can cut it, you can mix it, you can sand it and shape it into whatever shape you would like. It's incredibly versatile. And because you can mix the colors, you can create gradients and blends and just an incredible array of artwork with it.
When you talk about mixing, we all know the primary colors and the secondary colors and things, and they're all available in polymer clay. And obviously by this gorgeous photo, there's an amazing array of colors, but you can just start with the basics, can't you? And just play around and mix.
You can. In fact, I actually don't tend to buy all the colors. I tend to stick just with the primaries. I'm a big fan of working with primaries and then mixing the colors that I need. I find that my color palette relates much better when I do that.
Right. And so you'd need a set of warm primaries and cool primaries, though, wouldn't you?
I tend to, yes. Yeah. I tend to use both zinc and cadmium yellows, for example. I use both cobalt blue, which is a good cyan. The one in the bottom of this picture here, that's a nice cobalt blue. Sometimes I use turquoise, which is the lighter blue there. And then I also use ultramarine blue, and for my reds, mostly just magenta.
And there's a fashion at the moment for translucent clay.
I love translucent. Translucent is my jam. I do love translucent.
It's amazing, some of the work that's coming out using translucent clay. It's just magical because it looks like stained glass, which is incredible.
It very much can, yeah.
Is it a very durable product? Does it need much care?
Well, actually, no. Polymer is vinyl, and therefore, because it's vinyl, you're going to have some flexibility with it. So thin pieces of vinyl will be quite flexible, but thicker pieces are solid, just like any kind of plastic. And yeah, it's very durable. The difficulty that sometimes happens with polymer clay is that it's only going to be as durable as your skill is if you don't know how to bake it properly. So a lot of people are underbaking their clay. So if your polymer clay project breaks, it's underbaked, but a lot of people don't really realize that. So there's some myths out there about its durability.
Yes, because you'd assume if it broke, then it was overbaked and like a biscuit.
Well, you would think that, and that's exactly what happens. Is then they drop their temperature, and then it's not cured completely. Yeah.
Right. What do most people make with it?
Everything, absolutely everything. Jewelry is extremely popular, and right now there's a huge trend, in polymer clay earrings, and I like I'm wearing here. Just
yes, and I'm wearing
all different types.
Yeah,
exactly. So there's a huge trend in jewelry, but there's also sculpting. But you can make bowls, you can make creatures, you can make animals, big sculptures, little sculptures, tiny little miniatures. People who work with miniatures, like dollhouse miniatures, things like that. They make little itty bitty foods. There are people that make insects that are like this big with them, and there are people that make gigantic, huge sculptures. So it's incredibly versatile, and people make everything with it. Everything.
Right. And you don't really have to have any training because YouTube is out there, and also your tutorials, which we're going to talk about soon. I've got a photo here of what looked to me to be antique buttons. They're not, are they? They're polymer clay.
No, just polymer clay. Well, polymer clay, and they're painted. They're painted in a special way to get that rustic effect. And in fact, a lot of knitters use this particular technique to make buttons for their work.
When they're painted, are they painted with anything special?
I have a tutorial that explains how to do that. It goes into detail about how to do it.
Right.
But it's easy. In fact, I'd say that this particular tutorial is one that if somebody is completely new to what polymer clay can do, and they want to get started with something functional that they can use, then the Rustic, I always recommend the Rustic Beads tutorial, because it'll give them an introduction to the material itself, and I think they're fun, and I think they're pretty.
Yes, they are gorgeous.
And you can't screw them up.
They're really beautiful, and they're so unique and original, which is really important, I think, to try and stand out in this market. As I mentioned, I recently sort of joined the mass of jewelry makers and earring makers, and I'm astounded at some of the talent that is out there. This is one of your technique series tutorials. Is this your main source of income these days, rather than actually making the products? Because your knowledge base is incredible. What's involved with one of these tutorials? Are they written? Are they videos? Are they?
My tutorials are written. I don't tend to do video tutorials because I've got a background as a teacher. I tend to teach. I teach in real life back when, in the pre-COVID days. And I find that I don't do demonstrations in my tutorials. A lot of the tutorials that you see on YouTube are basically just a demo of somebody showing you how to make something. And that's great if it's a very simple technique, but sometimes there are contingencies. There are reasons why things are why you do a certain step, and what happens, what things should you look out for? What alternatives are there if you can't find the materials that you need for that particular step, those types of things. So my tutorials are written. A lot of them are also available as a downloadable PDF, because for some reason people still like to print them and make books out of them.
All of Ginger's links are down below in the description box, so I hope you'll check them out, and we'll be talking about a few other of her tutorials as we go. This is gorgeous.
This is a pinch pot. If you've ever worked with pottery, then you know what a pinch pot is. And I had to trim my fingernails for this one, but One of the things I like to do when I'm working with a new clay, because there are lots of brands of clay, I like to make a pinch pot because it teaches me how the body of clay works, because each one's a little bit different. Just it's no different than fabric. Fabric, each one you use handles different, it has a different hand to it. So polymer clay is the same way. And this is a pinch pot. And then I used, this one looks like I used some cedar branches, and I just pressed them into the clay because polymer clay takes texture. So I pressed them into the clay. Then I used powders. On the outside, I used pastels, and on the inside, I used gold mica powder. And then that was it. That's just an example of what you can do. You can do anything with it.
The shine coming up from the center, is that from a tea light, or is that the actual clay?
No, that's
or the
just the
mica
light.
powder?
That's
Great.
just the shine, the light, the shine. Yeah, I thought it was real effective.
Yes,
Yeah.
mica powders are very popular at the moment.
They are.
They
And
are.
you can use not just mica powders, but the fancy nail powders, the chameleon colors and the color shift. They work great with clay because they bond to the raw uncured clay. So you can paint with them. You can, that is a whole rabbit hole to go down. That's
Yes.
a lot of fun.
Just talking about, you said you had to clip nails. I've watched a lot of YouTube videos over the last year or so. And I'm astounded at some of the polymer clay artists that have nails that extend about an inch beyond their finger and are pointed, and they're beautifully manicured and it's really lovely. But I couldn't work like that. I just find that quite scary, really. But they seem to manage quite well.
I think it depends on, actually, that depends on the type of work you do, because there are times that I like to wear nails just like a lot of people. And it's interesting with polymer, the way that you use polymer. If you pinch polymer and pick it up like this, you're going to get fingerprints in it. So because it accepts fingerprints so well. In fact, you can see fingerprints in the picture that's on the screen. But because fingerprints are something you generally want to avoid in most cases, or at least when you don't want to have them, you tend to learn how to hold the clay as delicately. And when you do that, your fingernails are not involved, because you don't want your fingernails to ding the clay. So lots of times I can do quite a bit of work without even worrying about my fingernails, because they're not involved. I'm using tools to lift my clay. I'm using tools to touch my clay. I'm actually not. There's no contact with my fingernails. Pinch pots are a different story because you have to stick your fingers down in there. So they require a lot more finger work.
This is a brooch, I suspect.
That one is a brooch, yeah.
And it's got a layer of gloss or resin, or what's coated?
Actually, no. This is an interesting one. This particular piece is done with a technique called mica shift. Now, one of the things we didn't mention about polymer clay is that it can include mica in it. There are metallic or pearl type clays. And this one is Cernit metallic, and I've done a gradient, which we call a Skinner blend. I've done a gradient from the bronze up to the silver blue at the top. And so I've got a sheet of this metallic clay. And then you can impress an image in it with a texture. And this was done with a texture sheet. And through the process of the technique, you can make the surface absolutely smooth, so that what you're seeing there with those branches are not raised. That is absolutely flat and smooth. It's a ghost image that's in the metal flakes, in the metallic flakes in the clay. And the gloss that you see is done with sanding and buffing, because there's no resin, there's no paint, it's just sanding and buffing.
I know sanding and buffing is one of your most popular tutorials, and yes, I need to get that one to get that surface, because it's absolutely exquisite.
The interesting thing about polymer is there's many interesting things about it, but one thing that I think that I love the most, and that a lot of pros love the most, is the feel of a perfectly smooth sanded and buffed finish. There's just something about it. It's not cold. It's not cold the way that stone would be. It's warm. It's warm and comforting. And like a worry stone, except not stone. And it just feels like you want to pet it. You really do want to pet it. So it's a great finish. It's a lot of.
Is polymer clay very heavy?
No, it's very lightweight because it is plastic. So it's just, it doesn't have a lot of density to it. So like even wearing fairly large earrings, there's no weight to them.
Now, this, when I first saw this photo, I immediately thought of Murano glass. Is there translucent clay in this one?
That is translucent polymer clay. Absolutely. They're like you mentioned earlier, translucent is a variety. One of the colors of clay is actually uncolored clay. It's the clay body that doesn't have any pigment added to it. So you can then it has translucency. It's not completely clear. No. But it does have translucency where you can allow light to be one of the dimensions that you play with. So that's what I've done there. The colors were applied, and the colors are clay as well, polymer clay. There's no paint there.
Just beautiful. I've got a jar sort of sitting next to me of sea glass. Most of mine, unfortunately, are beer bottle colors, which are browns and things, shades of brown. And right. You know, I've always tried to find blue and some beautiful green, but the green, yes, because they're wine bottles, but the blue is really difficult. But sure. This is not glass, is it?
No, it's polymer clay. And you can make whatever color of sea glass that you want. I have a tutorial that shows how to do that. This is my faux Roman glass. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if you noticed, a few years ago, Roman glass came on the market to make jewelry. A lot of the assemblage people were using Roman glass. It's fairly expensive. It's not the kind of thing you want to mess up, and it only comes in Roman glass colors. And so I started messing around with my polymer and found that, oh, wow, I could make a pretty good facsimile of it. So especially for doing like in jewelry pieces or like earrings, when you need just a little piece, this is a perfect way of making it.
And the colors here are beautiful. And yes, you wouldn't find many of those colors in
and that's all polymer clay again. Even the pendant at the bottom, yep. The shell, that's polymer clay coated with mica powder and scuffed up a little bit to get a little bit of a rustic, grungy look there.
And so this is the tutorial that's available.
You know, I brought those up just to show that there's a variety of different types of things that you can do with polymer clay. It doesn't have to be just jewelry, but knowing the techniques means that you can then use the techniques to manipulate the clay in whatever other types of things that you want to make. I know that for the glass, I've seen people make bowls. I've seen them make mosaic pieces. They make really good pieces to put into a mosaic. My background is in biology. I have a master's in microbiology, and I worked for a lot of years doing molecular biology research. But then once I had too many children and then I couldn't afford daycare, I had to stop doing that. And then I ended up working with polymer clay, and one thing led to another, and here I am. But the background actually did help me quite a lot because it taught me to be a critical thinker. It taught me to be an explorer, and it taught me to be a teacher.
So your business now is basically doing the research, documenting it, and writing up some of your findings. I know recently you did one on the best gloss and sprays and things like that. Is that what you spend most of your time doing? Do you get much time to actually create for yourself?
I get very little time to create for myself because I think anyone who owns their own small business knows, and as anyone who works trying to sell anything on the internet knows, that marketing and small business chores take up 99% of your time, regardless of what you're actually selling. I think that probably 99% of my business is identical to what anybody would do, even if they were selling dog collars or something else, because you still have to interact with the public. You still have to do business. You still have to create marketing and graphics, and you still have to play with Instagram, and you still have to, all of that. It's all part of it. So I don't actually get a lot of time to create for myself, but my articles are both a public service and a little bit of marketing.
Yeah.
Because people, a little bit of Google, Google foo to get people onto my website.
Oh, definitely. I mean, you have a lot of free content that I have definitely read. And I know that as a primarily textile artist that I've been for many, many years, and now moving into a jewelry artist, it's a different audience. I did read that you can't have everything on your Instagram page if you do different things. So yes, I've started my own jewelry Instagram page to just try and differentiate, because otherwise your customers will get confused when they go to your site and they go, I don't want to look at jewelry, or I don't want to look at textiles. So yeah, it's quite interesting, sort of the thoughts that you have to put into marketing and getting your work and your name out there, which is it's a scary exercise for many people and not one to go into lightly, really, I think. Day of social media, it's quite scary. This looks to be a lamp to me, another lamp, or
it's a luminary, and it is again made with polymer clay. In this case, it's actually quite large. This is about 7 inches high,
okay,
and about 4 or 5 inches across. And it is made with translucent polymer clay and also opaque polymer clay. So what I did is I impressed a piece of lace into the raw clay, and then took the lace away and then baked it, and then applied opaque clay in those depressions, and then baked it again. So you have the opaque clay that blocks the light, and that shows that technique, shows the pattern on there. And I've got LEDs in there. I wouldn't want to put candles in there because it is plastic.
One of the things that I found quite interesting was you can bake your clay more than once, which I found quite surprising, but that allows you to create lots of really complex multi-level techniques. Yeah, so this is one of those.
A lot of sculptors will bake 30, 40, 50 times.
Really?
Because each time they're adding something new. They want to bake it to stabilize it. If you're trying to build something new on a lower layer, then you're having to press into that, the top layer. You're going to distort the lower levels. So you always want to bake sequentially if you can. And there's no problem baking multiple times. Not if your temperature is correct. The temperature has to be correct.
And for those that are still confused about baking, guess what? We have this one, which is very, very useful. I like the idea of using an oven thermometer because many of us still use our normal kitchen oven. And interestingly, a lot of them don't actually read the right temperature, do they?
No, it doesn't matter for your pizza if your oven is the wrong temperature, but it matters a lot for your clay.
Oh dear. How do you manage to keep everything straight in your head? You're obviously working on many different things at once.
I'm a little bit nuts.
I was going to say, I noticed in your recent article on the different sorts of varnishes and things that you had tested like 35, something like different products to compare. That's a really big task. Your record keeping must be great.
It has its moments. There are spreadsheets. There's a lot of different software that I use. Yeah, I do a lot. I do a lot of different things. I'm also a detail person, so I can handle a lot of details, but there are days that I just pull my hair out. I have to be honest with that, yeah.
If you're new to polymer clay, this would be a really good, useful tutorial. Is this a kit or is it a tutorial?
It's just an article on my, I do sell my tutorials, but the website has, even if somebody isn't interested in my tutorials or doesn't have the doesn't have the funds that they can afford them, there's still about 300 articles on my website that are completely free, and this is one of them. What I've always done with the polymer community is, when I see on Facebook that a lot of people are asking the same questions, when people are new, they do tend to have the same questions. So I decided early on to write articles that address each of those types of those areas of uncertainty. So most everything that a new player is going to run into will have a corresponding article on my website. And this is an example of one of my articles. There's a polymer clay starter kit. And in this particular article, I start out with the bare minimum that you need. Don't buy one of those polymer clay starter kits. Most of the stuff you're not going to need. Most of the stuff you won't even use. So what you really need are the things that I've listed and that I'm showing there. And then in the article, I go into more detail about the what you would need next. You know, if you continued, and then next, and then next. But don't buy too much at first. There's no need for it.
No, it's funny about that. You go in, you see oh, I need this kit, I need this, that, and the other. And then you find a year later, as I have, that I don't think I've ever used that.
Right.
But yeah, I agree. I agree.
This is an article that just goes into detail about what each of the different main brands of clay are good for and why you might want to use each of those brands. It also goes into detail and spells out if you have a specific need for clay for a certain activity, which brand would you want to use for? So like if you were working with small children, which brand would you want to use? Or if you were making jewelry, which brand would you want to use? So that's an article that spells that out.
Okay. As primarily I've been a textile artist, I've been amazed at how there's a crossover of techniques and tools. And one of the things I found fascinating was silk screens, because I have been using what we call thermofax screens for many, many years. And I'm very fortunate that I have my own thermofax machine, and I've just bought one of the new digital ones, which I'm very excited about. And they're coming up on polymer clay designs was people using silk screens. And when I looked at them, I went, they're thermofax screens. And they're very, very interesting, and the things that people are doing with them. And so I know there's a few major brands out there and some really lovely designs, but that just opened up a whole new world for me again, in just, oh, this is great. I can use my thermofax screens. I can use my stencils that I've been using for years. I have a wonderful collection of stencils, and suddenly there are tools that cross over. So that was a great bonus. So how have you found the silk screens are being used in the industry?
Most of the time, people use silk screens just to paint a texture, paint a pattern on top of a sheet of clay. But the beauty of it is if you print onto unbaked polymer clay, you can then cut out and further manipulate the sheet. So the sheet can be then shaped over something else. And for example, let's say you needed to make it go over a dome. So you could make a dome shape, which is quite difficult to do with fabric because you're going to get ripples. You would either need to pleat it or ruffle it or gather it, and you don't need to do that with polymer clay because it will stretch or compress. So you can actually shape the printed sheet of clay onto another shape. You can piece it. There's just endless things that you could do with it. So that's typically what people are doing, is printing just onto just sheets of polymer, and then like using cookie cutters to cut it out. But that's just the beginning. You could also use silk screens with powder. You could put mica powder. You could put pigment through the silk screens and print onto the clay with the pigment. You could use alcohol ink through them. It just goes on and on.
It does. I must admit, I about a year ago went a bit berserk when I was in the States, and I bought a whole pile of alcohol inks and the strange paper that you use for it. I had a go at it, and I thought, well, this is fun. I don't know what to do with it now. It's just it was on paper, and I don't primarily work with paper, and so I put it away. And guess what? I started looking at the techniques. Like,
Yep.
I can pull out my alcohol. And
Yeah.
it's been really, really great that, I've got another use for my my silk screens. I've got all this alcohol ink that I can now play with. And
it's an interesting thing about polymer clay. Historically, because polymer clay is a craft medium, and it is sold in the craft department of the craft store. It's not sold in the fine art department. So there haven't been a lot of people thinking of it as an art medium. So because of that, there historically were not a lot of polymer specific tools and equipment that were marketed to the polymer world. It's changed now, but in the beginning there weren't. So we borrowed from everybody. So you can use, for example, a tracing wheel from your sewing kit makes an excellent texture wheel to separate between two areas. So let's say you had two pieces of silk screened clay and you pieced them together. You might want to then run your tracing wheel along that line to hide that seam. There's so much that you can do. We borrow from other media constantly, and it's wonderful.
I bought a jewelry making drill from a jewelry suppliers about a year ago, and I had a problem with it. And when I looked up the manufacturers, it was actually made by a dental supply company, which I thought, oh, that's interesting. So, yeah.
Dental tools are fun with polymer.
Yes,
not just the scrapers from your teeth, those little tools, but it's little things like the little micro brushes that they use. Those are really handy in polymer as well.
So much to learn, but there's so much fun to be had. Now, another thing that's come to me, I'd heard of it before, but not really known that much about it, communities. And I know you have one called the Blue Bottle Tree Insiders. Would you like to just tell me a little bit about that?
I created a membership area on my website. So my goal here for doing this is that I hate to be dismissive of social media because I think it brings a lot of really wonderful things to our world, but it encourages a certain type of learning experience that isn't a particularly deep one. And I think that a lot of the experiences that people were running into on Facebook groups was a lot of conflict, a lot of negativity, and it wasn't the kind of place that you could talk in a safe environment about, for example, your fears about creating, your fears about what it's like to not feel like you're creative, or to get criticism from your partner about your work, for example, or just to talk to somebody and get an answer that you trusted about a technique. So I realized that by having a membership program, I could shelter a space where I could create the kind of world that I wanted to happen in polymer clay. So what I did is I created Blue Bottle Insiders, and it's members only, but it has a huge community. We have it's not a Facebook group. I have our own forum, our own community forum, and it's quite active. We have a lot of people posting every day. And I also do twice a week, we have a studio drop-in where we just Zoom and we just talk about studio stuff. We talk about everything, all kinds of stuff about mediums and how to do this and how to do that. It's fascinating. We also have every month, we have what I call a roundtable discussion. And that's where we talk about the juicy things like art versus craft, like voice, your personal voice, all those artistic questions that you'd love to talk about, but that you don't know who to talk about with. We talk about them in our roundtable discussions in Insiders. So if you're ready, if you're looking for more with your polymer, Blue Bottle Insiders is definitely where to go.
Right. Well, as I mentioned before, the links to Blue Bottle Tree Insiders and all the tutorials are down below in the description, and I do hope that you'll check them out. One of the best ways to keep in touch with Ginger is to join her email list, and she sends out emails regularly and full of information. So the link is below, so do check that out as well and put your name down. If so inclined, I would love you to subscribe to my channel, and please, there's a button down below, and I have great plans for this series on color and different ideas, and a lot of polymer clay and resin work, and we'll see what else we can come up with. I'd love to thank you so much for your time today and for your information. As usual, my brain is spinning with, oh, I think I'll just go and pull out this from the drawer, or go to my bathroom cabinet and get those dental things. So it's been really lovely to talk with you. I know it's a passion with you, and polymer clay is a passion with many people, and you've really been part of supporting this community.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity, and it's been great talking with you. Lots of fun.
Thanks, everyone. Bye for now.